Today I'm going to be going over one of my Angel decks. It's a 5-color deck, and it's taken some time to put together. There's some cards that I still need to get for the deck, but I'm going to go through it. I'm going to start off with the instances. Vampiric Tutor. It's 1 black, instant card. Pay 2 life, search your library for any 1 card, shuffle your library, then put that card on top of your library. I use this in the deck to find any multitude of answers that I might need for the board state or to ensure a quick win. And the price of 2 life is pretty much worth it. And that's why I'm running Vampiric Tutor in my Angel deck. Next up is Enlightened Tutor. Similar to Vampiric Tutor, although you don't pay a life, you pay 1 white mana. It's an instant. Search your library for an artifact or enchantment card and reveal that card to all players. Shuffle your library and put the revealed card back on top of it. So I can find Oblivion Rings if I want, mana acceleration sources that I want. I run Platinum Angel in the deck. I can find that. I can also find that with Vampiric Tutor. I'm running Crucible Worlds in this deck, and I'm also running Strip Mine. So I can set up for a very unfair game if I manage to get those cards. Next up is the sorceries, and I wouldn't be complete without having Demonic Tutor in the deck. Demonic Tutor. It's 1 black, 1 of any color, sorcery. You may search your library for 1 card and take it into your hand. Reshuffle your library afterwards. A very classic black staple card since the early days of Magic. I've always had one since I started out in the mid-90s. Demonic Tutor, absolutely a great card to have in your deck. So powerful. So I throw it in this deck, being it's a 5-card deck. I can take advantage of the tutoring effects. That's Demonic Tutor for you. Next up is a common card that I have in most of my decks so far. It's called Balance. I run this in my mono white deck, and it's a very unbalanced card. Basically what it does is it's 1 white, 1 colorless. It's a sorcery speed, and whichever player has more lands in play must discard enough lands of his or her choice to equalize. So basically what this is doing is it's saying if I have 5 land and the other player has 7 land, they have to go down to 5 land like me. Or if I have 7 creatures and they have 5, I have to go down to their 5. So it's an equalizer, but you get the control when it happens. You do that with lands in play, cards in hand, and then creatures. These are considered sacrificed, even though on the card it says creatures lost in the mana cannot be regenerated. It really means it's been changed to sacrificed. So it's a very unbalanced card, especially if you're playing the early game with Angel's deck and you need to wipe the board or slow down the progress of your enemy. You'll pull out Balance, and then you'll play post-board stuff like Exalted Angel, Baneslayer, and it usually kind of disrupts the other player's plans. So it's a very unbalanced card, even though it's called Balance. Next up, I have a play set of everybody's favorite removal card, Vindicate. Vindicate is an extremely powerful card in that it can target land. So I can slow down the opponent more, especially after a balance. Even though I might trade off the cards in my hand, I could theoretically disrupt their mana base. And this deck wants to get out its own mana and get ahead. Other than that, it's basic permanent removal. I probably would run Oblivion Ring in its place. It's the same speed. Vindicate's 1 black, 1 white, and 1 of any color. Sorcery speed, sorcery, destroy target permanent. So it used to be destroy target wallet, but they changed that with the new releases of this card. Extremely powerful card. I like the artwork on the older models, and I use it in my Maverick deck as a 1-of or sometimes as a 2-of. And I have a Planeswalker deck that uses 4 of these as well. So that is Vindicate. A very powerful card. Now I have a singleton of Wrath of God. Classic white card. It's 2 white, 2 of any color. Sorcery speed. All creatures in play are buried. It means they can't be regenerated. I'm playing basically a 5-color deck, but it does have a focus on white. So this is a classic card to stall early to mid game plays. I'm running Mana Vault and Sol Ring in the deck, so I can cast this out if I have reliable mana sources as early as turn 2. So that is Wrath of God. Next up are some artifacts. I'm going to go ahead and start off with my standard fare of Sol Ring for mana acceleration. It seems kind of a little odd to have this in a 5-color deck because you need to run color generating sources of mana, not just colorless, but a good portion of the cards do use colorless mana, so it makes sense to run this. And I'm running artifacts like Quicksilver Amulet to power out my creatures without necessarily paying the full cost. So this helps me with that. 1 colorless mana, artifact, tap, add 2 colorless mana to your mana pool. It's a very well-known card. Most players know this card by now. They use an EDH commander or whatever. It's restricted to 1 in Vintage. A very powerful card, Sol Ring. Next up is almost equally as powerful, if not more, depending on what you play, is Mana Vault. It's also 1 colorless mana or 1 of any color artifact, and you tap to add 3 colors to mana to your mana pool. This does not untap normally during your untap step. What it does is during your upkeep you have to pay 4 to untap it, right? If you don't pay the 4 to untap it, it's going to do 1 damage to you during your turn. So you can die to this, although it's going to be a slow die, or slow death rather. I usually can pit out a Baneslayer turn 2 with this card, so I like the rewards of the card versus the risks, and that's why I have Mana Vault in the deck. Next up is a card that was removed from Legacy, banned, unfortunately. It was part of a Miracles deck. It's Sensei's Divining Top. I have it in this deck because I'm not running my usual Scroll Rack land tax combo because the land count is a little bit different and I'm not running as many basics, if any at all. Sensei's Divining Top is 1 mana, artifact, first ability, pay 1, look at the top 3 cards of your library, then put them back in any order. Tap this card, draw a card, then put Sensei's Divining Top on top of its owner's library. So it's a sort of a draw manipulation tool and a drawing card, and it has built-in evasion with it, making it extremely hard to deal with if you use its ability as a response. So I've won games because of this card. I've kept so hands with this card in my hand opening, and I've won games through that. So it's a very powerful card, even on its own, especially when you're not using it. When you are using it in decks like Miracles or, things like that, that nature. So it's very, very effective tool at getting the answers I need in this deck. Sensei's Divining Top. Next up is Chromatic Lantern. This is a fun card. It's sort of like a Flexot in my deck right now at the moment. It does work, but I have played without it and it does work just as well the deck, but it does smooth out the mana issues because I do run a lot of weird lands that don't necessarily have the best efficiency. Basically, what it does is three of any mana artifact, lands you control have, tap 1, add 1 of any mana color to your mana pool. Then this artifact has the ability, you tap it and you add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool as well. So it really fixes the color mismatch issues, and I don't have to worry about having to fetch a certain type of land with this in play. So Chromatic Lantern, very, very useful and efficient in a 5-color deck. It's a Flexot because I have other options that I could do to fix the mana base or add threat density to the deck. Next up is a really powerful card if you abuse its ability. Crucible of Worlds. It's 3 of any color, artifact. You may play land cards from your graveyard as though they were in your hand. This card, combined with fetch lands, Sensei's Divining Top, and other deck manipulation tools, can create a good reshuffle effect, get you a fresh draw, if you will, in some cases. If you don't like the top cards of your library, I'll just play my fetch from the graveyard, shuffle the deck, and then do it again. I'm running Strip Mine in here. This plus Strip Mine is really not the funnest thing to be going up against. I've used it and have had it used against me, so it can make enemies of your friends real quick. So I do caution you playing tactics like that in what's kind of strangely, kitchen table Magic. I mean, I'm using a deck that's using this in kitchen table Magic. It's not exactly kitchen table Magic at that point, I would argue, but I wanted to push this deck's efficiency over the top, being an all angel deck, and part of the way of doing it is with Crucible Worlds. It also gives me a little bit of resiliency in people who would destroy my land, my multicolor land, so I can get it back and cast the high casting cost or the mana accelerators that I need to get my angels out. So it does have, defensive options with it, or reactive options, which is nice. So that's Crucible Worlds, very popular card, very powerful. Next up is Nevin Morale's Disc. This is a common card I put into most, if not all, my decks. It's 4 mana, artifact. Comes into play tapped, even though it doesn't say on the description here. The newer text has that. You pay 1, you would tap it, and it says destroy all creatures, enchantments, and artifacts in play, including the disc itself. So, it does actually sound upon there. I'm so used to the, comes into play clause on top, and just, that's an Invernal's Disc. It's a catch-all card that I like having. It's a utility, especially in my Angel deck where I don't have a lot of things early game, and I usually play this as a bluff card. I find that I can get ahead on board state when I start playing my creatures out, and it gains me momentum to establish board dominance, and it kind of makes the other player think about what they want to put out, and it just forces them to play differently, so they don't go all in necessarily to kill me that fast. The whole point of this card is to stall for as much as I can until I get my angels out online. I do have some things that synergize with the card in the deck. I have Avacyn, Angel of Hope, and she makes everything, all my permanents, indestructible, including the disc. So the disc is not destroyed when I use it, so I can reuse it and keep board wiping. And once I've got that lockout, it's kind of hard to get past it unless you get rid of one or the other somehow with removal. So that is Nevin Morale's Disc. Powerful card. Next up, much like my mono white deck, I'm running a pair of Quicksilver Amulets for the 5-color Angel deck. It's 4 mana, artifact. You tap 4, tap this card, and choose a creature card from your hand and you put it into play. Now, what I do first, kind of like what I do in Death and Taxes, is if I do activate this, I will ask people to say if it's going to resolve or not, see if they have a response. If it resolves, they can't respond once you put the card in, and you don't reveal the card that you're trying to put in. So a little patience exercise with this card can get you a long way with surprising people and not showing what's in your hand. I find it better in this deck than, say, Belbe's Portal, which is 5 mana artifact, and you tap 3 and you tap it. The only difference being is with Belbe's Portal is you would have to choose a certain creature type, and then you can put that creature type of the chosen into play. This, I like it because it's 4 mana to cast and not 5 mana, so I can get out a turn earlier. And if I can do things a turn earlier in this deck, I'm going to do that. However, it does cost 4 to use it, but usually I find that if I have the mana cost to cast this out, I have the mana cost to use its ability, as opposed to having a 5 mana cost and waiting another turn to use a 3 mana activation cost on an artifact. I find it's more efficient for Quicksilver Amulet to be in the deck. I'm not using Aether Vials in this deck because that would take a certain amount of time to build up, and while it's on the table, it can get destroyed. Even though this is pretty much the same weaknesses, I can effectively use it the turn I put it in, as compared to, say, an Aether Vial. So that is Quicksilver Amulet. Moving along to the creature section of the deck, I have a play set of Baneslayer Angels, because why not make an angel deck without or with or without Baneslayer Angel? I think it's just something you probably want to put into an angel deck if you're making an all angel deck. And coming at 2 white, 3 of any color, she's a 5/5, so that's a good body right there. You tack on flying, first strike, lifelink, protection from demons, protection from dragons. You've got a really strong card. The common thing is, oh, it dies to removal. Well, yeah, that's true. Most creature cards do die to removal. However, this thing has so much crap on it. It just makes it an efficient card for a 5 mana slot. When it comes to angels, it's the best one there is, in my opinion. So that is Baneslayer Angel at 5 mana. Next up, I have a playset of, you guessed it, Exalted Angel. Much like the mono white deck, I'm running 4 in this deck because of the multicolor requirement. I find that trying to cast this for its general casting cost is pretty tough, even though it's 1 more than the Baneslayer. It's 2 white, 4 of any color. It's a 4/5 flyer. So it's about on par for the cost and body, maybe a little bit subpar. But what I like about it is that when it deals damage, you gain that much life. That's a nice little ability, so it kind of brings it up to about even, if not a little bit better. And then its final ability is the Morph, where you would cast this for 3 of any color, face down onto the table, as a 2/2 creature. No color on the creature, just a 2/2 creature. That's it. You would then flip it up for the cost of 2 white and 2 of any color, and that ability on the card does not use the stack, which is nice. So you can do it and nobody can respond to it. So you can do a lot of tricks with this card and get away with it. The one thing you got to be careful of with Exalted Angel is that if you're in the red zone and you would be dead from combat damage, you would die even though you would gain life from this if you, say, blocking, because this has a triggered ability. It's not lifelink. If you give this card lifelink for any reason, you will get first the lifelink of 4 life or whatever buff damage it does, and then you get the same amount again from the triggered ability. So that's kind of interesting. So it's like, I don't have anything in the deck that gives this card lifelink, so I'm not making use out of that unique text there, but that is Exalted Angel. I'm mainly using it for a fast, get it out on turn 3, swing on turn 4, and the life gain that I get off of that extends me into the mid to late game where my angel deck really starts to shine. So that is Exalted Angel. Next up is a pair of Admonition Angel. Now this is a little bit hard to cast in this deck. I've debated using this or swapping it out in some cases, but I do use fetch lands in this particular deck, unlike my mono white deck, so that makes the landfall ability on this card a little bit better. Coming in at 3 white mana and 3 of any color, it's a flying 6/6, so it's a decent body and ability. It's a little bit on the efficient side. Its ability is it has landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may exile a target non-land permanent other than Admonition Angel. When Admonition Angel leaves the battlefield, return all cards exiled with it to the battlefield under their owner's control. So this can function as obviously removal for other permanents on the board that you don't like, or you can store away creatures that you have with this card. Like, say, if I'm going to Wrath of God, I can protect my higher hitting angels, wipe the board, and only lose this card. And that can function as a saving effect. I do run Crucible Worlds in this deck, so I'm going to be taking advantage of the landfall ability, especially with fetch lands, so it'll trigger twice. So you can see the synergy that goes on with this card. The only problem is that it's 6 mana and it's 3 white. So meeting that 3 white condition can be kind of rough in a 5-color deck, to say the least. That being said, I can usually cheat it into play with Quicksilver Amulet. So, and then I can do crack a fetch land also. Its ability on as a response. So it's quite interesting, some of the interactions you can do with this card in the deck. So that is Admonition Angel. I have a pair of those here. Next up is a flex slot of 4 cards. Basically, I said I wanted to make a deck with Angel of Despair. It's 7 mana, 2 black, 2 white, 3 of any color, 5/5 flying. So it's a subpar mana cost body ability, but when you factor in its other ability, when Angel Despair comes into play, destroy target permanent. That's Vindicate on the stick, basically. It's sort of like the Necrotic Slivers, and I'm running Vindicate in this deck, so I figured I'd double up on the removal part, the single target removal. I like the fact that I can target lands again with this card, which makes it nice. I do have a little bit of a backdoor synergy thing going with Emery of the Sky Ruin and Rhea Dawnbringer with her and Phyrexian Tower. I would sack her to Phyrexian Tower and have Rhea trigger on my next upkeep. This comes back into play, destroy a permanent, and I can keep doing it once per turn. Either with Emery or the Sky Ruin out and enough planes, or with Rhea Dawnbringer and Phyrexian Tower. So that is Angel of Despair. Very high mana casting cost card. It's nice though, because if someone runs like, say, Sneak and Show, or Show and Tell, that card, part of Sneak and Show, I'll resolve this, and maybe they'll put out an Emrakul. Well, this will take out the Emrakul, which is kind of funny, because it's Angel of Despair. It's not a targeting, it's an ability on the card. It's not a spell at that point. And it's a triggered ability when it enters the battlefield. So, very, very fun card to play with. In actual use, it does come in handy. I have 1 games off of it. So it's about even for the course there on that. Next up, I have a couple legendaries I'm going to go over. The first one is going to be Sigarda, Host of Herons. She comes in at 2 white, 1 green, and 2 of any color. Legendary creature, flying, hexproof, 5/5. Great card already right there, because she can't die to target removal. Only mass removal will get rid of her, or mass controlling, or mass sacrificing. Well, not even the sacrificing, because look at the second ability. I forgot about that. Spells and abilities your opponents control can't cause you to sacrifice permanents. She nullifies balance, nullifies Diabolical Edict, nullifies Liliana Vess when she makes you sack a creature. Just an overall great creature to keep in your deck versus black decks mainly. I find her pretty well off in this deck as a hoser. Even as a blocker defense, 5 mana for 5/5 flying is not bad at all. And it has the hexproof. That's one of the key parts of this card, is that it has hexproof. And the extra gravy is the spells and abilities your opponent's control can't cause you to sacrifice permanents. So it's a good defensive measure for the deck. It works very well, I found, especially when I'm fighting my friend who runs vampires. So he'll do like Gatekeeper Malachi out, and if I have this out, it pretty much just says no point. It turns his Gatekeeper into a 2/2 hate bear, or not even a hate bear, just the 2/2 bear. Especially when it doesn't have any lords out. So very effective card in the deck. I think it's one of the best cards around. I use it in my Enchantress deck, like you see. That's because of the hexproof primarily. So, Sigarda, very good card. Next up is Linvala, Keeper of Silence. I run her in my mono white deck also. She's 2 white, 2 of any color. Legendary creature angel, 4/4 flying. Activate abilities of creatures your opponents can't control can't be activated. So, shuts down Deathrite Shamans, Llanowar Elves, a myriad of other cards too. So it just gets rid of elves. Mainly, I have another friend who plays elves, and this card comes out and it kind of slows him down when it comes to generating mana. So it's a good card. The 3/4 flying for 4. It survives lightning bolt, and it's also one of the cheapest casting cost angels in the deck that comes out. So that is valuable in itself. Linvala, Keeper of Silence. Next up is Avacyn, Angel of Hope. 3 white mana, 5 any color. Flying, Vigilance, 8/8. So good body for the casting cost price with an extra of Vigilance and Evasion. So, and the last ability on it is Avacyn, Angel of Hope, and other permanents you control are indestructible. So she makes the Nevan Naral's Disc synergy work very well with her, and she can save your creatures from board wipes like the Wrath of God that I would do in order to reset the board. I'd probably, if I had Quicksilver Amulet out and I had the mana to do it, I would do that before the Wrath of God resolves, or I would just play her out in the next turn of Wrath of God. So she can make things very one-sided easily with this deck in certain cases. Instant hate draw. I mean, most of the time she gets Swords to Plowshared or Caractacus back to my hand. So that's the drawback from this. And she can be sacrificed, forced to be sacrificed with Diabolic Edicts and whatnot. But overall, I find the gains much better than the risks with this card. So very, very powerful card for this type of deck. Next up is another card we mentioned before is Rhea Dawnbringer. She comes in at 3 white and 6, flying 4/6. So subpar body. At least it has evasion mechanic. But what's interesting about this card is it says at the beginning of your upkeep, you may return target creature card from your graveyard to play. This works with the Phyrexian Tower Angel Despair that I run in the deck, so I can kind of get it back. It also helps me with getting, cards that might be discarded or destroyed from the battlefield into the battlefield back again, like Emeria, Avacyn. It's a way of cheating in other cards that without having to pay their mana cost, which is nice. I'll hold this in my hand, let's say, and if I have Avacyn and she gets sacrificed, at the end of the turn, I'll Quicksilver in Rhea, and if they don't do anything on my upkeep, it triggers, I'll get Avacyn back, and it just blanks their removal. So, are there better cards that, for less mana? Of course. There's a black card called Sheholdred. She is 7 mana, and she has the same abilities except it doesn't have flying, but I believe it has fear, and it forces your opponent also on their upkeep to sacrifice a creature, and on your upkeep you get a creature card back from the graveyard into play. So she's strictly better than Rhea in most cases. However, this is an angel deck and not a Praetor deck, so that's where Rhea comes in. So that's Rhea Dawnbringer for you. The last legendary I have is Iona, Shield of Emeria. She comes in at 3 white, 6 colors, or 6 of any color, flying 7/7. So a little bit below the bar for the casting cost and the ability in the body. However, as long as she enters the battlefield, choose a color. Or as she enters the battlefield, choose a color. Your opponents can't cast spells of the chosen color. She's a popular target for Reanimator. I'm not doing Reanimator in this deck. I wanted to go a little bit of a different route than doing standard Abuse the Graveyard ideas. So, but her and what's that guy's name? The demon from Amazon. I can't remember his name. You draw cards off of him. Most people reanimate that guy. They sometimes reanimate this guy. It depends on the situation. But I find that Quicksilver Amulet, this card into play, a lot of fun, just to lock people out. And I've won games off this card against goblins. Surprisingly, with the Mana Vault and Soul Ring out, I managed to get a what was it, like a 2-turn or 3-turn lockout, but that's extremely rare, that chance of happening in the deck. It does happen from time to time, but it's not anywhere consistent. But Iona, Shield of Emeria, powerful card. Recommend her for an Angel deck. The last card I have in this deck also is a pain in the butt to deal with. It's called Platinum Angel. 7 of any colors, artifact creature angel, flying 4/4. So subpar body with an ability for the mana cost, in my opinion. Although you could argue that 7 of any color in a multicolor deck is not bad. So maybe in this particular deck, it's a little bit more efficient. The important thing what everybody knows about this card is that you can't lose the game and your opponents can't win the game when this card is out. So I have pulled off some bullshit with this card, protecting it, making it invulnerable, resurrecting it from the graveyard with this angel deck. This card makes my friends mad when it sticks on the battlefield. It sticks in play. So, yeah, I had a game where one of my friends was almost effectively milled out, and it was a two-headed giant game, and we're playing somewhat casually. I mean, it was like, I guess, three other teams that were playing, four other teams rather, and we should have lost by all means, but we didn't. We actually ended up winning, and our team ended up controlling the board out of three other teams. I mean, we play huge games, so it's fun to play those huge games sometimes, and this card has definitely made for some pretty fun moments on my side, not so fun moments on their side. Moments in Magic. So, Platinum Angel, interesting card. I can tutor it with Enlightened Tutor, Demonic Tutor, Vampiric Tutor. So effectively, I can find the answer if I know I'm going to die and stall off a little bit longer to restabilize with this card. That's the benefit of using multicolors in this particular Angel deck, is I can access the tutors and find answers to what is going on the board. So that is the main deck. I'm going to go over the lands in the deck. We're coming in with a play set of Marsh Flats. I would run more than 4 fetch lands in this deck, but I don't have any others at the moment. Basically, you tap it, pay 1 life, sacrifice Marsh Flats, search your library for a Plains or Swamp card, and put it into the battlefield. Then shuffle your library. Again, as mentioned earlier, Sensei's Divining Top with Crucible Worlds and the landfall ability on one of my angels makes this card really effective, and I think very necessary, especially in a 5-color deck. You need to access your mana. So I designed the mana, the lands, to be able to be fetched any one of the color lands with this one particular card, Marsh Flats. Next up, I have a play set of Plateaus. I don't have access to a variety of dual lands, but I have the playset of Plateaus in here, and that works just as well. This deck began as a red, black, white deck at one time, so part of the mana base is still being updated from that time. But Plateau works very well. Not much else to say other than it's a dual lands classic, very powerful, red-white mana. That's what it makes. Next up is Scrubland, and I have a playset of these. Much like Plateau, it makes white and black, though, and I can still fetch it with Marsh Flats. Interesting thing to note about these Plateaus and Scrublands, they count as plains. So it works with the Emeria in my deck, and that's part of the reason why I have the 4 playsets of each. Otherwise, I'd split it in half and do it a little bit differently. But I do want to have fun with Emeria, so I had to go this route. And like I said, I don't have a variety of fetch lands. I have mainly Scrublands and Playlands in my collections. And also this began as a black, red, white deck, so that's why there's Scrublands in there. Next up, I have a Singleton of Watery Grave, because I still need to be able to fetch a black mana source with Marsh Flats, but have access to blue to cast a blue casting cost creature. I would put a Scrubland in there, but again, I'm limited on the dual lands I have. That's the only one I got. If I had a Underground Sea, I would use that instead of Watery Grave. So that is Watery Grave. Basically, it comes into play tapped, unless you pay 2 life. So it could be a 3 life penalty with a fetch land, unfortunately, which is a lot of life. This deck does not generally want to use life as a resource that fast, but unfortunately, due to the 5-color nature, you have to make sacrifices. So that is Watery Grave. Next up is a singleton of Overgrown Tomb. Much like Watery Grave, it's black, but it also, instead of blue, it produces green and has the same effect. It comes into play tapped. You can pay 2 life to have it come into play untapped. Again, they count as swamp forest, island swamp, whatever you want to call it. These dual lands, they count as both types, which is nice for your fetch lands. Overgrown Tomb. I do play green cards in the deck. One of them you've seen earlier was that Angel. Next up is the opposite version of Watery Grave, would be Howl Fountain for the deck. It's a plains and an island, so I can still find it with Marsh Flats. Again, enter the battlefield, pay 2 life to untap it, have it untapped, entering, or have it tapped, entering the battlefield. And next up is Temple Garden. Same idea, except I have access to green mana now. So it comes into play tapped unless you pay 2 life. Fetch it with Marsh Flats. Temple Garden. Now we're getting to the singletons of legendary lands. First one is Karakas, a legacy staple of mine in most of my decks. Makes white mana, so there's no downside to that. Or you tap it and return target legendary creature to owner's hand. This is incredible in stalling the board, saving my own creatures, and then recasting them out. Let's say if I want to protect Rhea, or save Iona and reset the color, I can do that with Karakas. So its flexibility in the deck it's an efficient card for the slot in the deck. I mean, most of you guys know about Karakas. Very powerful card. I like the interactions with this deck and some of the shenanigans I can pull off. Next up is Corehaven. I would have went with Maze of Ith in the slot. However, I do need to make mana with this deck, being that it's such a high casting cost deck. Legendary land, tap to add 1 colorless mana to your mana pool, or you tap 1 of any color, 1 white, and then you tap Corehaven, and you prevent all combat damage that would be dealt by target attacking creature this turn. It fits in with the plan of stalling until I can get a stable board state, or I can get, gain life or control the board, basically. This advances that plan, and is incredibly annoying to deal with. The only downside is that it makes colorless mana, but again, it's better. I'd rather have something that makes colorless mana, rather than just being a functional Maze of Ith. So that's why I'm running Corehaven in this deck. Next up is a part of a combo, or not combo, but a synergy, is Phyrexian Tower. I mentioned it earlier. You tap it, add 1 colorless mana to your mana pool, or tap it, sacrifice a creature, add 2 black mana to your mana pool. So this could have some functionality in terms of preventing people from stealing your creature. You would sack it in response, instead of them gaining control of it. If they want to Swords of Plowshare it, you can say, okay, if I don't need the life and I want it in the graveyard, you can sack it. The bonus is you would add 2 black mana to your mana pool. So you could potentially power out some of the higher cards at the cost of getting rid of one of your creatures. So I don't normally do that in this deck. I can. It has worked out, but I mainly use it to prevent people from taking my creatures, which hasn't been an issue in my play group, and to get abuse the Angel of Despair mechanic with Rhea Dawnbringer or Amaria. So that's why I have Phyrexian Tower in here. Next card I have is a singleton of Cavern of Souls. I have 2 of these. I don't own any more. I would like to get more. This would be a perfect card for an all Angel deck for 5 color decks. What it does is when it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type, tap to add 1 colorless mana to your mana pool, or tap to add 1 of any mana color to your mana pool. Spend this mana only to cast a creature spell of the chosen type, and that spell can't be countered. That is an amazing land, and it's very expensive. I think it's like $90 as of this recording. And last I checked, about almost 8 months ago, it was like 50 or 60. So it's going up in price. I would recommend this card in most any Angel deck, even if it's a mono deck, if you can get away with it, because the uncounterable clause really makes it worth having in any tribal deck. So I mean, you see it in Legacy Goblins. I use this in my Death and Taxes deck if I want to get Thalia out. just to give you some cover against blue decks, and I do play blue decks in my play group, so this does help out a lot. And what I like about it is that I can fetch it up with Demonic Tutor, with Vampiric Tutor. So that's why I also run a lot of singletons in this deck, because I do have tutoring abilities to find the cards in my deck, and land part is a very tight part to go with. So that is Cavern of Souls. Everybody's hated card, or loved card, depending on if it's used against you or you're using it, is Strip Mine. Tap to add 1 plus mana to your mana pool, or place Strip Mine in your graveyard and destroy one land of your choice. So if I have Crucible Worlds and I have a tutor in my hand, I can go for the early lockout control part, which is tutoring for Strip Mine, and then using that and abusing that. That works to a degree. This deck needs time to build up its mana base, so it can hinder that too. But having the ability to do that and outright win a game is too powerful not to pass up. Is it casual? No. Is it fun? Not really. Unless you're the one who's doing it. I mean, I have it in the deck as a response to some of the shenanigans my friends pull. So this is my answer, my big fuck you to the face to them. But Strip Mine. That's in vintage. It's restricted to 1, so I have one in the deck. So that is Strip Mine there. Next card is a more casual card for sure. Is Emery of the Skyruin. I do run this in my mono white deck as well, mono white angel deck. Basically, it comes into play tapped, and you tap to add 1 white mana to your mana pool. Now, what it says is at the beginning of your upkeep, if you can control 7 or more planes, you may return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So if I have 4 Plateaus, 4 Marsh Flats, Howl Fountain, Temple Garden, Mistveil Plains, which is the next card up, I have a lot of things that are considered planes that count towards the 7 count of this card. Now, is that necessarily efficient in this deck? No. I just like to build in a little bit of utility in the deck for fun to test out, and it has worked out in my favor sometimes. But yeah, I would concede that there's probably better mana to put in that slot for what it does. However, I like trying that, and I like to have a little fun, and that's the idea behind the multicolored all angel deck. And the last card I mentioned is Mistveil Plains. It comes into play tapped, which is unfortunate, but you tap to add 1 white to your mana pool, or you tap 1 white and this card, and if you control 2 or more white permanents, you can put a target card in your graveyard on the bottom of your library. So if one of my tutable answers is in the graveyard, and I have this out and I have 2 white permanents out, I can tap this, put the card on the bottom of my library, play my tutor, get that card back out, and use it as an answer, reuse it. So that is the value of having Mistveil Plains in the deck, and it also is, like I mentioned before, a plane, so it counts towards Emeria. So is it worth it having in the deck? Probably not as efficient as other land cards like Emeria the Skyruin. I generally don't like cards that come into play tapped unless you have abilities that allow them to come and play untapped, which is nice. But that is Mistveil Plains. I don't run any basics in this deck, although I'm reconsidering probably doing that just to have a backup source, because I do play against Ghost Quarters, and that's a free land kill, and it hurts a lot. So it's a greedy mana base. I mean, the necessity is there for the 5 color, although I think I could take out those 2 cards that I have and put in maybe a Plains and a Swamp to get access to tutor effects and answers. So we're going to move along to the sideboard here. And I have a 2 Magister of Worth. She's an angel. One black and 1 white, and then 4 of any color. Flying 4/4. And it has Will of the Council. When Magister of Worth enters the battlefield, starting with you, each player votes for grace or condemnation. I can't pronounce that. Condemnation. If grace gets more votes, each player returns each creature card from his or her graveyard to the battlefield. If condemnation, or condemning, basically, if you vote for condemning, you get more, or gets more votes, or is tied. Destroy all creatures other than Magister Worth. So really, what she's used for in this case is a board wipe, other than herself. So I would say, if I fight a deck in the second game that has a lot of aggro or tokens or creatures coming out, and I need more Wrath of God effects, I'm going to this card. And I would probably slot out some Angel of Despairs out of the deck, because then single target doesn't really work as much against that. So that's why Magister Worth is in there. And she has worked a little bit to my favor in my testing with her, so it's not a bad card to have. Next up is a Singleton, although it should probably be more in this particular deck because of its unique ability. It costs 1 green, 1 red, 1 black, 1 blue, and 1 white. So 5 of all colors. And it's a flying 5/5. So it's a decent body for a unique casting cost. What's special about Maelstrom Archangel is whenever Maelstrom Archangel deals combat damage to a player, you may play a non-land card from your hand without paying its mana cost. Now, I believe, I don't know remember, but I think you can still counter the spell because you're still playing it without paying its mana cost. It's still being played, or cast rather. No, I think reading the card now, you can get past counter spells with it. You might want to look it up, but obviously, if I can play another card onto the battlefield with this card, that makes this so much better, especially in a 5-color deck, and makes all these high casting cost cards usable. I have thought about using, and it probably would be more efficient to use like a play set of these, or 3 or 4 in the deck, just to push it out and get other creature cards out on the table. Like this is a main vehicle other than the Quicksilver Amulets. Although it would make the Mana Vault and Sol Ring a little bit less efficient because I require mana at this point, colored mana to cast the card. So that's Maelstrom Archangel. Not a bad card. It does see use in the deck. Next up is Akroma, Angel of Fury. She's an interesting card because she's 3 red and 5 in a color. Now that's very hard to cast in this deck off of 4 plateaus. However, I do have other ways to get her into the battlefield. And I also have an ability on here that can allow me to play her for a separate cost, if need be. She's basically 8 mana. She is a 6/6. She can't be countered. She has flying, trample, protection from white, protection from blue. So that is a good set of abilities for its mana cost, in red, too, of all things. She has fire breathing effect on her where you pay 1 red mana. She gets +1/+0 until end of turn. And then the special thing that I like about this Akroma is the morph ability. You can play it, again, face down for 3 of any mana as a 2/2 creature, and then you would flip it up anytime you want for 3 red and 3 of any kind of mana. So she does work in the deck, especially if I'm finding it's more of a blue-heavy metagame. I'll put her in, and I'll try to use Quicksilver Amulet with her. Otherwise, she's a subpar card in general for the main deck. So definitely sideboard tech. And she's a legendary, so I can abuse the Karakas if I want to with her. Next up is a more functional card, and a card that does work pretty decently in the deck for stalling, is Gisela, Blade of Golden. She's 2 white, 1 red, 4 of any color. Flying, first strike, 5/5. So evens out for the body and the casting cost efficiency. What she does that's special is if a source would deal damage to an opponent or a permanent an opponent controls, that source deals double that damage to that player or permanent instead. If a source would deal damage to you or a permanent you control, prevent half that damage rounded up. Now, she's extremely powerful in a multiplayer situation where she can make other players hurt each other faster and half the damage towards you. So she makes it less efficient to go after you while she's out on the table because she's going to play politics like that. I like her like that. And in this Angel deck, I can Quicksilver in response to something, kill something with the first strike ability, and reduce whatever other damage it gets through. Or if I'm doing damage and I want to maybe just need like a little bit more damage to win the game, Quicksilver in, Bam, there you go. You just won the game. It's a game-changing card if you have access to Quicksilver Amulet in the deck and the mana to use it. I can Karakas her back out to save her. She's just a decent card to have in deck, and I do have the right mana colors to cast her. She's a little bit easier to cast than, say, a Chroma, for example, or the next card that's coming up. So that is Gisela, Blade of Gold Knight. Decent card for the deck. Next up is a not as efficient as Gisela, but a more fun card. Again, this deck is not. In some ways, it's try hard. In other ways, it's more like I'm going to be casual about it. So that's the kind of fun thing about this deck, in my opinion. And this is one of the fun cards in the deck. Orilla, the War Leader. 2 white, 2 red, and 2 of any color. So 6 mana all in all. She's flying, vigilance, haste, and a 3/4. So it evens out. What's special about her is that whenever Aurelia, the War Leader, attacks for the first time each turn, untap all creatures you control. After this phase, there's an additional combat phase. So she can really push the damage through. If I have Baneslayer out or if I have Exalted Angel out, I can get double the life off of her. So that is one of the special things about this card, and I like that better than I used to have Ryza in her slot, and this was a much better choice in my testing and efficiency for the deck. So I went with her instead. Is she the greatest card in the deck? No, she's not the greatest card in the deck, but she is fun to use, and when I do get to use her and pull off the shenanigans that I do with this deck, it is a lot of fun. Next up is the white version, original version of Akroma, Angel of Wrath. 3 white, 5 of any color. She's a 6/6 with flying, first strike, trample, haste, protection from black, protection from red, and vigilance. Like in my mono white deck, she's an absolute hoser, a beat stick. She finishes up the game very nicely, and in my case, she starts and ends the game very nicely if she can live. Not really much else to say about her except that she's an efficient beater, and if you can get her out, you can win a game off of her. What I like to do is, say, if I have 2 angels in my hand and Quicksilver Amulet, I'll Quicksilver in the other angel first at the end of their turn. Then on my turn, I'll put her into play. So then I have the benefit of attacking right away because she has haste, which is unique for a white card of her capabilities. So that is a Chroma Angel of Wrath. Next up in the flex slot, I'm probably going to be changing some of these slots coming up. They're just there to fill out the sideboard at the moment, but I have Legacy Weapon. 7 of any color to cast a legendary artifact. What's interesting about this card is that you pay 1 green, 1 red, 1 black, 1 blue, and 1 white. Remove target permanent from the game. That's very interesting. I like that idea of having an answer that removes any permanent, including lands, from the game. That is fun, but it's a 7 mana casting cost, and it's an artifact. So I can tutor it with all my tutors if I want to, but I can't abuse it with Quicksilver Amulet, so I have to hard cast this. However, it is 7 of any color mana, so I can use Sol Ring and Mana Vault with this card. The only problem is the functionality of it then becomes the colored mana that you require, so it kind of negates itself in some ways. Last part of it is this: if Legacy Weapon would be put into a graveyard from anywhere, reveal Legacy Weapon and shuffle it into its owner's library instead. So I can get a reshuffle effect off this card. Is it a efficient sideboard card? No. Is it a fun card? Yes. Would I like to replace that card? Yes, I would. And I would like to get Atraxa. She's another 4-color angel, black, blue, and green, and 1 colorless, or any color. And I would like to put her in that slot of the Legacy Weapon, but I don't have Atraxa yet. Next up is Elixir of Immortality. I always pack these in most of my decks because I do face Mill, and she does help out with Mill. Elixir does help out with Mill here. Pay 1 of any color, pay 2, tap this, gain 5 life, which is good for life gain in this deck. And then you shuffle this card and your graveyard into your library. So I can reset my graveyard if I want to and tutor for the answer that was once in the graveyard by using this card. Next up is a pair of Swords of Plowshares. I like to increase this to 4. I don't have her in the main deck because I want more creature threat density. However, Swords of Plowshare is a good stalling card for early game and answers. So there's a fine balance. I might play with the creature count depending on how I feel. So they're in the sideboard for now. They probably should be in the main deck. I've been testing it out. I like having the main deck as is. I might be moving them over to the main deck depending on what happens in the future. But Swords of Plowshare, 1 white, instant. Target creature is moved from the game entirely. Creature's control gains life points equal to the creature's power. One of the best removal in the game for white, if not the best for creatures. However, people said, why don't you use Path to Exile? Well, I don't like giving them tempo advantage through land. I'd rather give them life. This deck doesn't care about what life total they have. This deck can win regardless of their life total with Platinum Angel out and just outrun their deck. That being said, I'd rather give them life because I just take it away. Land would speed up their deck against mine and my deck a lot more faster, especially if I'm running land destruction cards in here. It doesn't make sense to give my opponent land again. So that's Swords of Plowshare. Next up, I'm going to be changing these probably down to 2, but a playset right now currently of Hide and Seek. So Hide and Seek is... I like this card for a number of reasons. It functions as board control. On the left side, Hide, it's 1 white, 1 red. Instant, it says put target artifact or enchantment on the bottom of its owner's library. Now, the interesting about that is that it doesn't destroy, it doesn't remove, but it does answer indestructible cards on the board, whether they be yours or the opponent's. Now, I say yours because maybe I might want to stall and put my Platinum Angel on the bottom of my library, tutor it again, and cast it out, or hide my Quicksilver and tutor it and cast it out again. There's a variety of options with the hide part of this card. So that makes it really nice to have it in the deck over, say, Disenchant or Sundering Growth. Now, the unique part about this other side, I've used this in playtesting on Cockatrice with vintage players, it's kind of funny going against combo decks with the right side of this card. It's called Seek. It's 1 black, 1 white, and what it does is, in an instance, you would search your target opponent's library for a card and remove that card from the game. You gain life equal to its converted mana cost. Then that player shuffles his or her library. So if you're fighting like a Tendrils deck that has a singleton of a card in there that they need to finish their combo off, you play this card and they don't have an answer for it, they might just as well fold on the spot. I've seen some guys just fold from that. And I can't believe it. Like, I'm running a 5-color Angel deck that's the slowest deck in the world, and you pull some kind of bullshit like this, it's like, who would ever expect this kind of card? That's why I like it. It's sort of like a sleeper card in some ways. Is it the best card for this deck? No. There's better efficient cards to be putting in the sideboard for this deck. However, I don't have some of those cards at the moment, so I'm using Hide and Seek. It's a fun little card to pull out, and especially the life gain on the Seek part can extend you to longer games. So if I need to play a quicker deck against Affinity, anything that uses enchantments, or if I need to go searching a player's library, for their one answer that they have that would wreck me, this is the card to use. And I have 4 of them here to ensure the consistency of the draw. I want to bring it down to 2 because I think there's other cards I could use that are better in different ways for the deck. So that is Hide and Seek, a fun little card for this deck. And it also came from the time when I had it as a black, red, and white deck. So obviously a black, red, white card would make sense to go in that deck. But that's my 5-color Angel deck. I have been torn between going back and forth, back to the black, red, and white version of it, or just keeping it 5 colors and trying to maybe get an Underground Sea as a singleton, a Savannah, a couple of other cards, and replace those Guild Pack dual lands. But I have to trade up for that, and that's going to take me time. And there's some other Angels that I would like to get that are coming out. Shillelagh, Voice of Plenty, Lyra Dawnbringer. Although I might not put Lyra in this one. But definitely Shillelagh and Atraxa, the Praetor's Voice. So that is my multicolor Angel deck. Thank you for watching. I'm John with the Fossil Channel.